Hello and welcome to the Blend podcast. I'm your host, Mike Ruff. With national insurance and apprentice pay increases coming in April, it's a time when many garage owners will be thinking about how to best manage these kinds of changes while keeping their teams motivated and businesses profitable. So, who better to talk us through it than Jennifer Webb of HR Vitals? Jen has a wealth of experiences in helping garages navigate these kinds of challenges, so if you're looking for practical advice on managing pay increases, keeping your team happy and productive, and making your business more attractive to future talents whilst you're at it, stick with us. Jen, welcome back onto the Blend podcast.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm really pleased to be here.
Always great to chat, Jen. Now, let's get straight to it because it's a timely chat this, almost as if planned, because we've got national insurance and apprentice pay increases coming in April, as mentioned. So I'm keen to get your thoughts on these.
For some people, it's a huge stress. It's a pressure and worrying how they're going to afford it. And the difficulty with the national insurance, for example, is it's not necessarily something the employee is fully going to appreciate. They're not fully going to see the benefits of it. When a minimum wage is increased, it's kind of chasing the tail of what everyone else is being paid. And every, minimum wage usually makes the news. It's usually a bit of a, public knowledge, isn't it? It's well known that wages are going up and they're going up by quite a lot. I remember before I started HR Vitals, there was talk of minimum wage going to £10 an hour. And I was like, that's crazy. That's so much money. And now look. So it is changing naturally with inflation and things like that.
How can garage owners best prepare for these pay increases?
It starts way before the change happens. And I think being prepared for pay rises is something that the aftermarket could really give some good attention to. So what we generally notice is the main triggers usually for a pay rise is people get nervous about their staff leaving. They're looking at what their competitors are paying, or they just want to keep, thank them. So you pay, sometimes the pay rise is out of fear of someone leaving, but other times it's out of, I want to thank them, that they are really important to me. I want to give them a couple grand more. But there's no career plan as such in the aftermarket. That's what I tend to notice. And so what I would be suggesting more is that garage owners look at where they want their business to be perhaps in 2 years' time, and what's the difference from now to that, and what can their staff individually contribute to that business getting to that point. And I think a lot of people, when they start thinking about this, they're thinking, well, the job equals money. I need money to pay my staff. But what we encourage is that you actually break that down a lot more. So in that job, what things are needed? Is it that it's accuracy of work? Is it that they need to be more of a team player? Is it that they need to be more informed on the business development? What sorts of things do you need from those individuals to get you from A to B over those 2 years? And then you put together a little career plan, a nice path of, if you do this course, if you achieve this, in 2 years' time, you will be earning X amount. And it will probably be that they'd actually be earning more, but the employee knows then, this is what I'm sticking it out for. This is why I choose to work here. This is what my career looks like. And we find when we're recruiting and we're trying to poach technicians from main dealers, sometimes they will say they hate their job, but they're staying where they are because there's a career plan. They know when their pay is going to go up. They know if they do A, B, and C, they'll be on X amount of money. And I could say to them, you'll be on that earlier in the aftermarket, but because we're not providing them with that structure, that plan, the owner hasn't got that set up. We haven't got the ability to prove that. And so it's a pay rise isn't just what's the competition doing, let's be competitive. It's about using that money to show the employee their hard work's being rewarded, but that you have a plan. I think that's the biggest thing. It's not reactive, it's proactive, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes complete sense. I imagine many of our listeners will already have such plans in place, but I know many others won't. And even if they have considered it before, they won't perhaps know where to start.
Okay, so I advise starting with grabbing a pen and paper and writing down these 6 categories. So I'll see if I can remember them. First is accuracy of work. Second is their communication. Third, business targets. Fourth, no, I can't remember, independence. Fifth, teamwork. Sixth, presentation. Write down those 6 things. Score every single employee in those 6 areas. And for some, presentation won't be that important, but for others in the company, it will be really important. So you're instantly starting to identify what that person in particular needs to be good at. And so if it's not that important that they're not that good at presentation, why are we hounding them? Why are we working on that when there's another thing that's more important to the business development, having a structure? Then you score everybody and you've got to score yourself. That's the real toughie, because what we find is business owners are very good at developing and driving the bit that they're comfortable at. So then that means the bit that they aren't comfortable with, they shy away from and they don't do so well at. So then that becomes a whole business weak spot. So they've scored everybody, they've scored themselves. Then coming back to that, well, what do I need in 2 years' time to be able to afford lovely pay rises and, nice money in the bank and good holidays and all those things? What do I need from each person, presuming you have that workforce in 2 years' time and striving towards that? What do I need from each person to improve? That's where you start. And then you look at, right, what courses are around to help me? What can I do to help? So thinking about those one-to-ones, all of those things, your appraisals that you're doing at the end of the year. And if you're not doing any of that and you don't want to be doing any of that in your garage, that's absolutely fine. That's your choice. But you will be aware that actually you need Tim to be a little bit more aware of the business side of the business. So you can be sharing bits with him and helping him on that as and when, because that's what's really important for Tim to help you get to where you want to be in 2 years' time.
Really valuable advice there. Thanks, Jen. And also well remembered on that list. So we've had those conversations with individual employees, but what about when those employees go back into the workshop and start talking among themselves and suddenly you've got staff coming back to you raising concerns about pay disparities?
If you never kind of attend to this problem, it will come at you like a tsunami at some point. And again, probably quite frustrating for me to say, for people to hear. Again, it's in the prep, in the planning. But if you never have done anything and that conversation comes up, my advice really is to buckle up for about 6 months and have a really honest conversation with everybody and saying, genuinely, I love being as genuine as possible. I think it's so powerful. And saying to the team, I've always done pay rises by just looking at the market. I'm now deciding or realising, or I want to now be working on giving you all a career plan, giving you something that so you know what the next couple of years looks like. I'm still working it out myself, so give me feedback as we go, and I will be open with you and keeping you up to date as we go. And then encouraging that they have little one-to-ones monthly, just little chats as they go of what this looks like, how things are going, how are they finding it. And it might be that person that you could really do with developing in something, they just aren't interested. And so having a conversation of, this is why it would be really great. Why are you not interested in it? What type of thing are you looking for? And I think sometimes if someone is just not interested, you've just got to work with that. You can't, if people aren't naturally playing to their strengths or naturally interested in what you want them to be bringing to the company, I think you've got to work with that, especially if you didn't have those conversations at the very beginning in a recruitment, because is it their fault if you never had those conversations when they chose to come and work for you? And now you're saying you want them to be doing these different bits.
It sounds like it's a case of being open, but how open are we talking here?
Not open to the point where you're discussing the finances of the business, but open with the plan. And You don't want to be disappearing off to your office or, working late in the evenings, working out the plan and then present the plan, because then you've done all the workings out in private, but your staff are behind. They haven't been involved and they can't understand how you got there. So have those conversations as early as possible. This is what I'm looking at. This is what I'm planning for everybody. This is what my target for when we'll try to be able to present this to you. And the reason why I say kind of buckle up for 6 months is that's what we've noticed, how long it generally takes for an employee to get on board. And they can at first think, oh, this is just a fad, or they're not going to stick this out, because naturally human nature is kind of, I'll give this a go once. Oh, it didn't go down well. I'll retract. I'm not going to do that again. So it's kind of having that buckle up. This is what I'm going to be doing. Having those conversations as early as possible. It's human nature to get a bit of resistance, to get a group that aren't totally on board. It's your job, in my opinion, as the owner, as the leader, to be consistent, keep showing up and help them get on board with what you're doing. And what we're talking about here is helping people be paid more. You're not asking a horrible thing of these people. It's just about making sure that they like the way that you're going about it, so that they keep coming up to your place to work and not wanting to go elsewhere.
Yes, you're all on the same team, aren't you? So as a garage owner, I guess the key is to ensuring your staff understand that, I suppose. Now, with salary increases, as a garage owner, you may have higher expectations, and rightfully so if you're developing your staff. So what's the best way to evaluate whether your employees are meeting your expectations?
So those 6 categories that I mentioned, you can use them to give you little mini monthly to-dos. So say one of those categories, accuracy of work, for example, is something that you want your employee to improve on to be worth this pay rise. You break it down into one thing per month for them to work on. This is why we like monthly one-to-ones. So you meet at the start of the month. For Feb, this is what I want you to be working on. Here's some actions. Here's how I'm going to help you. What's your opinion? Can you think of any reasons why it's going to be tricky for you? And then at the start of the next month, you review how that went. Hopefully it's all hunky-dory, it's lovely, it went well. If not, review it. Why didn't it go well? And I imagine from experience, what I've noticed is people are just worried their staff won't engage. So if you come back to that thing at the beginning that I said about, you tell them initially what you're working on and why, you're more likely to get their engagement and their buy-in. And so I would say really breaking it down into one reasonable thing each month, chipping away. And then by the end of the year, you will have 12 things that person has improved on. And those 12 things should be worth the pay rise. That's what I would say. And generally making sure that you are always given a bit of wiggle room. So my advice is actually to work as if there's 11 months in the year, because obviously annual leave. If you really want to go for it, just act as if there's 10 months in the year, because then that buys you a few weeks of if there's sickness, if you're quiet, all of these factors. But again, it's all in the prep and in the planning with these types of things. It really is.
You mentioned a monthly meeting there. That sounds like a lot of work and a lot of time, especially when you're already running a busy workshop.
Yeah, that is generally the opinion. You can make it what you want as the owner. The most important thing is that it's somewhere private, and that it's a non-negotiable. If you commit to these types of things, you do not move it. But yeah, it can be as much work as you want it to be. But I would encourage spending some time on these things, because it's the type of conversation that keeps your staff, that keeps happy staff. And, the listeners will be happy to pay more if it means the staff stay. And I think they don't realise the value of their time. Giving their time to that person is what they build their loyalty with you. You build that rapport. They get on board with what you're doing as a business. I think a lot of listeners probably beat themselves up a little bit in the sense that they don't realise how valuable their time is. And in some situations, their time is more valuable than that pay rise. Everybody wants a pay rise, but when we're talking to technicians, they're saying like the pay rise is like a plaster. It will cover a problem. It will buy some time for a bit. But if those actual problems aren't addressed, they're still going to go. And then the owner's fuming because they've paid more, and then the tech still leaves. So I would say, yeah, it does take a bit of time. You want to take that into account. You need to budget your time to allow a bit of that. If monthly's too much, don't do monthly. Just start every other month. I would say quarterly is not enough. That, you know, there's not that enough of that regular communication to get people on board. But yeah, it does take a bit of time, but it's time spent really, really well.
Talk us through the change in businesses that you see when a garage goes from not having employee development plans to where it's made a very clear difference to the business.
Oh, it's so cool. It's really cool. And this is why we know it takes about 6 months, because you go from the first meeting and they're really nervous about it. They're dreading it. It's just, oh God, like, I feel like this is going to be really painful. They do the first meeting. It's never as bad as they think it's going to be. And even if the tech is just thinking, hey, I get to sit down and have a cup of tea for a minute, they're still there. So you do it monthly, and it's amazing. Like the stuff that comes out, like by the 6th month, classic example of, you know, what I'm describing was like I'd meet with the client before the meeting, like, come on, you can do this. These are the things you're going to talk about. And then we'd meet afterwards and you'd be so much lighter. And yeah, I suppose that was all right. And then within 6 months, he came, had the meeting, and like the stabilizers were off and he was off doing them without, you know, me chatting to him before and after. And his key technician had come to him and said, I'm thinking of leaving, in that one-to-one, and had that conversation. No resignation had been put in, but finally we'd got to that point where those conversations were happening early. And so he was then at the point where he was comfortable with how to handle these conversations. And so use that one-to-one, like, right, pens down, talk to me. Why? What is going on? And so then we had a month before the next one-to-one to try and turn those things around. And he did. And that was, God, like 2 years ago. Tech's still there. Things are still hunky-dory. And the other thing that I'd like people to reflect on in their garage is there's a few patterns that we notice, because obviously we're really lucky. We speak to garages, technicians all day, every day, have done for years now. So we know patterns. And a pattern that I love sharing with people is for those that are self-starters and it was them and one other tech. And, you know, they probably had 2 ramps and it was just those 2 getting going. Business goes well. And a couple years later, like maybe 6 years later, they've probably got 7, 8 staff maybe. Things are going really well. And they're now like a proper business owner. You know, they got staff and all of this is happening. But that guy, that tech that was by their side at the beginning, we tend to notice actually becomes the naughty one in the workshop, and becomes, you know, they become like the one where the owner's like, what's going on? Like he's causing trouble in the workshop. He's, you know, not happy, complaining about pay, all of these things. And it is definitely down to the fact that he used to be your best man, your wingman. You know, he used to be there for everything. You worked alongside each other all the time. And now he like maybe sees you like these monthly one-to-ones, if that's happening at most. When you go into the pub at like Christmas work do, you've probably hired in another tech who's a master tech, or, you know, another problem solver, a really good tech. And they just don't know their place anymore. They used to be your number one, and now they don't know where they are. And it gets frustrating. And they just need a good conversation. And so if you notice that, for anybody listening, if that's going on in your garage, have a really good chat with that tech, because you can get back to how things used to be. It is just the fact that you've grown and they don't know what their place is anymore. And so things like having those regular conversations, if they always happened from the beginning, that consistency would have really saved the day.
That's a character that sprang to mind as you were chatting, actually. There's bound to be some garages out there with an old timer that's been working in the business for years, and not everybody likes change. So have you come across any, for want of a better word, stubborn characters that may perhaps be holding back the whole team somewhat and causing friction when it comes to implementing your plans?
Yeah, it happens loads, doesn't it? Yeah, it's loads of garages have this, and you just need a really good chat. That is all it takes. They'll have, if it's probably like the communication's just been dry, it's been empty, there's not been enough there. And I'm sure, like, sometimes, especially if you've had a technician for ages, if you've inherited the business from your dad, for example, and then that tech seeing you kind of come into the business as a boy, and now, like, you've grown up and you're running the place, and that tech's like just waiting till retirement. It could be really hard, especially then if you're bringing in Garage Hive and things like that. But honestly, like, I'm smiling because I think it's quite sweet, really. I think it just needs a really good conversation, and that's what we see. Like, they in every garage needs kind of, like in a band, when you've got the drummer or the bass player, they are just the consistency. Like, they are doing the bread and butter jobs or just ticking along. And then, like, the diag tech can go off and do a riff and do all these fancy bits. Like, you can't have everybody being the same. And I think, like, those people in the garage really need to be appreciated and celebrated. But I think it does just come down to communication. I think that sometimes for some people, it hits a nerve in the sense that tech that's been there for a long time knows that person's weaknesses, perhaps, or they feel like they're just not easy to get on board. And I think people struggle in this industry to get people on board. And so they're very good managers in the sense of managing the diary, managing the workload, managing the vehicle repair, can do management really well. But when it comes to leadership and inspiring people and having those difficult conversations and things like that, people doubt themselves. So yeah, but see it loads, a really good conversation and a bit of patience does the world good with that.
Any advice on how garage owners can structure their training and mentoring programs to ensure all employees are developing into productive and engaged team members?
There's some incredible people delivering training that can probably do a far more technical answer than I can. But from a managing perspective, I would say it does come back to that. What's the finish line? It's like 2 years, I think, is a healthy goal. So what needs to happen in 2 years' time, working backwards, and the communication can be as simple as, if you do this course on this date. One thing I will say on courses is you can recoup the costs if the training is not mandatory, and you need something in the contract that states costs may be recouped, and you need a training agreement that is signed before the person goes on the course. So say you've got a technician that wants to go to Tech Topics and do a bit of training that's not essential, but they're really excited about it and they really want to go. That type of thing isn't mandatory. So you can put things in place that, yeah, I'll fund you, I'll support you, I'll pay for it. But if you leave within the next 2 years, you will be paying me back something.
That's the big fear when it comes to employee development. I've heard it so many times, especially when it comes to apprentices, that fear of having invested so much time and effort and money into someone only for them to disappear out of your business.
Yeah, and it's not just them leaving, it's them giving that knowledge to another garage. You've paid for another garage to be better. That stings. And so also having a conversation before they go on that course of, tell me 3 things you want from it. What type, and if they just go, I just want to be better, or I just think it'd be cool, or well, I think it's next. And that's the other thing that we noticed loads. So loads of garage owners will say to their staff, tell me what you want. And they're ready to try and make it happen, deliver if they want to specialize, if they want, whatever they want. The problem with that is actually staff need a few options presented to them. It doesn't work to go, tell me what you want. You need to go, right, well, if you want to specialize in EV, or if you want to, it depends, obviously some garages aren't touching it, every garage is different. But if you need to be able to give them like 2 or 3 choices of what you can do, which again, people will be thinking, that's another job, Jen. And yeah, it is, but you are in the position to do that for your staff. So if you can say, right, so option A is you go on this course, you do this and do this. Option B is we just do in-house training and, going through that. And then another option, and then talking them through what that looks like. Then they can go home, talk about it with their partner, thinking about what they want. And then they get that investment with you. And then it all weaves in. So then they understand why they're going on that training, and then that it's actually part of a bigger picture. If the conversation ends with, I'll send you tech topics. Yeah. All right, send me to tech topics, get me some time out of the workshop. Dave's been doing my head in anyway, so it'll be good to go, or, whatever. Or the flip side of that is they've just got a new baby at home. They might not be comfortable, might be worried about going on training. So all of these things or we see people say yes to going on training, but actually they're just saying that because they think that's what the boss needs to hear. So again, giving them choices, they then feel more comfortable and more engaged. So it's about, when it comes to training, not just you tell me what course you want, or do you want to go tech topics at some point. It's about giving them options, helping them see what it looks like when you get through that qualification on the other side, and what support's there, and what the pay looks like. So you can see how it all circles back then. So it doesn't matter if minimum wage is going up in April. They know when I finish this course, I'm having a chat with my boss and my pay is probably going to be this amount.
Suppose it's a real chance to put your business out there as a forward-thinking garage that does right by its employees, and that in itself is an excellent advertisement for attracting new talent into your business.
Yeah, loads of garages are doing things on the quiet, and they might be doing like a few benefits, or off for the books, or whatever. Silly opportunity missed. Like, make it official, make that part of the recruitment thing. And I think loads of people, again, it comes down to like having a bit of time to reflect and pat yourself on the back. They might think like, oh, well, yeah, of course the techs are going to have that bit of kit. But actually, 3 other garages in town might not have that. And you could have technicians in those garages losing the will to live because it is just miserable not having that kit. So yeah, it's really about looking at what you're offering, making it official. And also, if you once you get familiar with doing this kind of career planning approach, then when you're interviewing and recruiting, you can be saying, the role is this. If you're interested, here's the 3 options for you moving forward, what it could look like. And it also, if it is a case of you just really need them to stay an MOT tester, finding out what they want. Are they happy to stay as an MOT tester? What types of things are going to be, what are they interested in? Have they actually also got another hobby going off racing? And if actually you could give them a bit of flexibility to be tinkering on their car or going off doing these races, you've met the thing that they love, and they'll stay happy ticking along as an MOT tester because they get like, that's the deal.
Now, I'm going to go off on a slight tangent now, Jen, because I'm keen to get your thoughts on social media content whilst you're on. We all know the impact social media can have on a business, but having the whole team on board and engaged in the process can sometimes be a real challenge. So for any garage owners who are eager to create content but struggle with a lack of employee involvement, what advice can you give here?
Okay, I would bring this back to the six things that I listed, and just to tag on to that, those 6 categories I put together a couple years ago because I realized every problem that my clients were having fell into one of those categories, and it's still true to this day. So if you really get familiar with these categories, So what, in my opinion, and it's different for every business owner, in my opinion, you are wanting to drive social media because it's good for business. So it falls in the business category. So I would then be asking myself, honestly, is it actually part of any of my team's responsibility to be driving business? If it is, okay, then let's be working on getting that engagement with them, helping them understand how that impacts the business. If it's not, just let them know it's an option if they're interested in it. If they're not interested in it, respect that. That's not part of their job. It is part of the business owner's job, in my opinion, unless you go and get somebody and hire somebody to come into the company to do it. And I am not a social media expert at all. There's other people that in the industry that can help with this massively. I would say probably the charm of social media is that you can be as creative as you want. And so if you don't have employees that want to get involved, come up with something else. And maybe even ask ChatGPT. None of my staff want to be involved in social media. Come up with some creative ideas of how I can still do it, but just as a one-man band.
Some good advice there. Thanks so much, Jen. And thanks for chatting. We have sadly run out of time, but I look forward to speaking with you again soon.
Cool. Thank you very much, Mike.
Thanks, Jen.
Thank you.
That's all for this episode of the Blend Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe on your favourite podcast player so you're always up to date. And if you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to like, subscribe, and why not drop your thoughts in the comments. You've heard it before, but your engagement with the podcast really does go a long way in supporting us. So thank you. We'll be back with another episode very soon.